Welcome to this Ahri Ultimate Guide. I'm Zoose, and after testing plenty of items and runes from the best pro and solo queue players, I've put as much info in this guide to help you emulate their builds and gameplay. This guide contains everything you need to achieve your goal this season with Ahri, whether you're a newer player aiming to get out of Iron 4 or grinding to get Diamond for the first time. With YouTube's new timestamp feature, you can quickly find the information you're looking for by scrolling through the timeline, or simply scroll down in the description where you'll find a full list of timestamps and information. Ahri, the charming assassin, is the perfect mix between a mage and an assassin. AoE and single target damage, mobility, CC, and even some HP sustain, she can fit into almost any team comp. She was the first champ I reached 100 games with back in Season 4, and it seems like no matter what the meta brings, there's always a place for this nine-tailed fox. I'm 100% confident that if you watch this entire guide right until the end and constantly practice everything mentioned in this video, you will climb and you will reach your goal in ranked. So remember to save this video to a playlist or bookmark it, so you can come back to certain parts whenever it's convenient for you. Or if you really like, watch it all in one go. If you find this guide helpful at any time, be sure to give it a like. Let's quickly cover what her abilities do, then after each ability, I'll show you special tips and tricks using ranked gameplay footage to instantly give you an advantage in your next game. Even if you know what her abilities do, you'll want to watch this entire section until the end for the tips and tricks so you understand her potential. Her passive, Essence Theft, heals Ahri anytime she hits an enemy with any of her abilities, but that's only when she's reached 9 stacks. She receives 1 stack anytime she hits an enemy with an ability, and she can get a maximum of 3 stacks per ability. Just for clarity, you don't need to hit champions to get stacks or activate the healing. Using it on minions or neutral monsters will both charge stacks and proc the healing. An easy way to see if you have full stacks is to look at her orb when it turns green or when you hear a slight shimmering noise. There's small differences with each skin. I'll mention specifically how to gain stacks for each ability coming up. This will be your main sustain tool in lane. Even though you can get healing from minions, you should still try to use abilities to damage champions to make efficient use of your mana early game in lane. It can make for a slight bait tool, tricking the enemy thinking you're going to die and then getting a slight burst of health. The heal isn't too significant, so unless you're really confident of the enemy's damage, it's best not to take a risk with this heal bait. Her Q, Orb of Deception. Ahri throws out her orb, dealing AP damage to all enemies it passes through. Once it has reached the maximum range, it then returns to Ahri, now dealing true damage to all enemies it passes through. She can gain 2 passive stacks on the same champion if she lands the first and second part of Q, but she can easily get 3 stacks if you hit multiple enemies. The true damage is great to chunk tanks. The massive AoE damage makes it perfect to wave clear. During teamfights, this will be your main ability to deal AoE damage. Anytime enemies are bunched up or entire areas, you want to hit as many enemies as possible. You can use your Q to check if there are enemies in a brush. Once you throw out your Q, if you gain stacks or heal from your Q passive, that means someone is in there. It will also make a shimmering sound if it hits a target. Great to avoid face checking. Her Q has a sweet spot right at the max range tip where you will deal both the first and second part of damage with 1 hit. It's not exactly easy to aim, but keep it in mind for a surprise burst with a Q poke. Q will always return to Ahri even if she dies mid-Q flight. Therefore, even if you're about to die, you want to position as best as you can for the return Q damage, hopefully salvaging a kill so you go 1 for 1, or dealing enough damage so your teammates can finish them off. Since it deals the same damage to all enemies it passes through, positioning is important to deal optimal AoE damage, and we'll cover that in combos and mechanics. Her W, Foxfire, activates 3 flames that orbit Ahri for 5 seconds, as well as provide a burst of decaying 40% movement speed for 1.5 seconds. The flames will seek any target within range and deal AP damage. All 3 flames can be used on a single target, but flames only deal 30% after the first. Each flame, even if on the same target, deals 1 stack towards your passive. It will prioritize champions hit by charm, which is her next ability I'll cover, then any other target Ahri has recently auto-attacked within 3 seconds. When fighting in minions, make sure to auto the champion before you use W, so it will prioritize the champion first, otherwise you risk losing W damage to minions. It will deal 200% damage to minions below 20% HP, so it's great to last hit minions and push waves. Even if you are right next to enemies, the flames will not target enemies out of vision. Therefore, when fighting near brushes or around Fog of War, try to step in the brush or ward the area before you use this ability. The burst of movement speed is great to escape, dodge skill shots, and even help with landing your important abilities, and I'll go over ways in combos. You want to spam W anytime you have enough mana, usually when you have at least a lost chapter, to get to lane and generally move around the map faster. If you can, use W on targets along the way to reset the cooldown timer, otherwise it will take 5 seconds for the flames to fizzle out and another 4 to 7 seconds depending on your cooldown. Her E, Charm, sends out a heart-shaped skill shot that deals AP damage to the first target hit and charms them. When the enemy is charmed, they will slowly walk towards Ahri at 65% reduced speed. The enemy will take 20% bonus damage from Ahri's abilities within the next 3 seconds. Charm will also knock down enemies, which basically means it will interrupt dash and airborne champion abilities. We'll go through specific abilities you can interrupt in the mechanics section. Since this is a single target skill shot, it only adds 1 stack towards your heal passive. This will be your main tool to catch and burst enemies. Landing this one ability will usually determine whether you secure a kill or the enemy escapes and survives. We'll go over techniques to increase your success rate in the combos and mechanics section. If your team decides to invade, starting E for the CC is a good idea. Hitting the charm will almost always result in a kill, however, don't level it until you're ready to throw it out. The main risk is that you will struggle to push at level 1 without your Q, and some enemies may abuse you early. Hitting charms is much easier when an enemy is chasing you. Since the charmed enemy walks towards you, use charm right next to your tower to bait them in, so they'll not only be CC'd, but walk further into the tower, taking a few more tower shots. Charm has a small delay and isn't the hardest skill shot to dodge for mobile enemies. Look for opportunities to chain CC charm with your ally CC for more consistency. If they are already stunned or even slowed, it will make it much easier to land. This is your best tool to secure a kill when your jungler ganks your lane. Once the enemy is CC'd, your jungler can chain their CC or output damage on the charm target. Sometimes it may be better for your jungler to land their CC first, then you can follow up with your charm. A flash charm combo means you will catch enemies off guard from quite some distance, and I'll go over that in the combo section. Finally, her ultimate, Spirit Rush, allows Ahri to dash up to 3 times within 10 seconds. Each dash will release up to 3 energy bolts whenever there are nearby targets, prioritizing champions and dealing AP damage. This is the one ability that turns Ahri from a vulnerable poke mage into a threatening burst assassin. It can be used to gap close and damage enemies, or simply use it for escapes. Just like most dashes in the game, it's great to dodge skill shots and outplay your enemies. Just like her W, even if you are right next to the enemies, the energy bolts will not target enemies out of vision. Therefore, when fighting near brushes or around Fog of War, try to step in the brush or ward the area before you use this ability. Each dash will only activate 1 firebolt per enemy. This means if there are 3 enemies nearby, you will gain 3 stacks of essence theft per dash, and has a potential to get a full 9 stacks from 3 dashes. When you have ult in lane, push mid hard to draw pressure and hit the tower to obtain some plating gold. Careful with hard CC matchups like Lissandra or Malzahar, which you cannot dodge their ult, especially if they have flash. Most other matchups, if you ever get ganked, you have 3 dashes for an escape. Hopefully the pressure you draw will alleviate pressure on your other lanes and jungler. Be creative with your escapes. Don't just dash through lane all the time. Try to dash through walls, as it will be much harder for the enemies to catch up. You can abuse your mobility of having 3 dashes by positioning aggressively, sometimes even from behind, to catch unsuspecting ADCs and other squishy targets in teamfights. We'll talk about plenty of strategies and how to use this in the teamfight section, specifically in the gameplay teamfight section. Remember how the second part of Q dealt true damage. Most enemies will try to avoid this important damage, so it can be quite hard to land. However, with your ultimate, we can position ourselves by dashing and aligning with the enemy champs, so they take damage from the second part of Q. Also, Now that we've learned the importance of landing her E-Charm CC, we can now increase our chances of landing it with the dashes from our ultimate. There's more techniques and info in the combo section. Ability order. Her Q is her most important ability for poke, wave clear, and damage, so max this ability first. The second ability to level is quite flexible. If you want more consistent damage, then you'll want to max W second because of the increased damage and cooldown reduction. With the recent movement speed active change, it's almost always best to max W second. If you're after utility, you want to max E second. This will increase the charm duration by just over half a second when fully leveled, making it an extremely valuable CC. However, you'll lose extra damage from W. This is great for a utility-based gameplay with Glacial Augment, which we'll go over in the build section next. Leveling E does not reduce the cooldown. If you're not sure what you'll need, then stick to leveling W second, as it's the most consistent and doesn't rely on hitting a skill shot. And just for clarity, you want to level your ultimate whenever you can, which is at level 6, 11, and 16 for the cooldown reduction and increased damage. This section contains 2 full build cheat sheets, Electrocute and Glacial Augment, based on the best pro and solo queue players. Simply pause the video on the cheat sheet and you'll have all the details you need, including items, runes, ability order, and more, so you're ready to play a game right now. I'll discuss some of the rune choices and give you alternatives depending on your specific game and situation. Then I'll mention one other rune, Dark Harvest, which can be viable, although rarely picked. After runes, we'll look into specific items and their unique interactions with Ahri that will help you make the most efficient purchase in game. Knowing some of these interactions will increase your DPS and combo accuracy. Electrocute. Let's cover the most popular and highly optimal build for Ahri, Electrocute. Hitting a champion with 3 separate auto attacks and abilities will deal extra damage. This rune synergizes perfectly with her poke, trading, and burst playstyle. You will literally chunk around 50% of a champion's health with a simple poke pre-6 combo and completely one-shot squishies with your ultimate. For all simple and harder ability combinations, check out the combo section of this guide. Ignite will be your main summoner spell in most games, but you can select a few others for specific games. Not only does Ignite synergize with your burst playstyle, it even counts as a proc for Electrocute. Your first minor rune is flexible. The most consistent and safest rune is Taste of Blood for the sustain it provides. Cheap Shot will deal bonus true damage after you land your E-Charm. Last choice is Sudden Impact, which will activate extra magic pen and lethality when you use your ultimate, increasing damage from autos and abilities. Eyeball Collection is the default best option simply for the damage it provides from takedowns. Ultimate Hunter seems to be the most optimal final rune for the ultimate cooldown reduction. At full stacks, we'll have an extra 25% CDR, which means your ult will be up about every 30 seconds. For some extended fights, you might even be able to ult twice. Ravenous Hunter is another option as the third rune for the sustain it provides from all the ability damage you deal. As for the second page, the most popular and optimal set is Mana Flow Band and Transcendence from Sorcery for the mana sustain and CDR respectively. The mana will help during the early parts of the game where Ahri seems to struggle with mana before she picks up her lost chapter. These are quite flexible, so feel free to pick any other minor runes from the Sorcery second page. Another option for the second page is Biscuit Delivery and Time Warp Tonic for the extra sustaining lane from the Inspiration page. Against very heavy poke lanes, this might be a solid choice. Luden's Echo is your first major item purchase for this build and specific rune page. It deals bonus damage anytime you hit an enemy with an ability, perfect for this burst playstyle. The rest of the items are situational and aren't specific to this build, so I'll cover special items interactions after the Glacial Augment build. Glacial Augment. This is a rarely seen rune, however, Ahri can take advantage of the slow it provides by making it easier to land that all-important E-Charm. We'll be using slows from the Hextech GLP and Twin Shadow items, which I'll explain shortly, to make picks and catch out enemies nearby and even in Fog of War. This rune activates a slow anytime Ahri auto attacks a champion, and a freeze ray slow whenever Ahri slows a champion with item actives. This rune is best taken when your team already has enough damage but lacks pick potential or even engage. since you will lose potential damage from the previous runes and items from Electrocute. The first minor rune from Inspiration is Magical Footwear, providing free boots at 12 minutes or sooner if you're able to get takedowns, which reduce this time by 45 seconds each takedown. With the movement speed from your W, you'll be fine skipping boots early on. A second option is Perfect Timing. This is especially useful against enemy champs that can burst you, like Zed or Talon, and you're already looking to build Zhonyas Hourglass later on. The second minor rune is a close call between Minion Dematerializer, which will help last hit CS and clear waves in general, and Biscuit Delivery, useful for lanes when you need sustain. The final minor rune is Cosmic Insight for the CDR it provides, especially with this Glacial build. The second page you want to take is Domination, with Cheap Shot and Ultimate Hunter as the minor runes. Ingenious Hunter is still a very solid choice, especially with this build, so pick it over Ultimate Hunter if you think it's best. Now let's mention two specific items for this build. Hextech GLP sprays icicles that damage and slow enemies. They'll be slowed even longer with the Glacial Augment passive, possibly hitting other enemies with the Freeze Ray. It has surprisingly long distance, so you want to use this to catch enemies further away and follow up with a charm or Q. If you feel you're too far for this active to hit, use one of your ultimate dashes to position yourself. Twin Shadows will send out two ghosts who seek out nearby enemies. Enemies touched by the ghost will be revealed and slowed. This is perfect to catch out immobile squishies, make picks with your team, or scout areas where you lack vision to find enemies in Fog of War. For enemies further away or over walls, you can simply close distance with your ult dashes, aiming to hit your charm on a slow target. Again, this will proc the Freeze Ray active from Glacial Augment, and you may slow more enemies nearby. With Glacial Augment, you don't specifically have to finish Hextech GLP first. A solid option is to buy Lost Chapter component for the mana sustain, and then aim to finish the Twin Shadows, perhaps looking to make picks early against immobile champs in your lane, or use it as an opener when you're ganking lanes. Or simply roam, look for the jungler, and try to get a kill. Just for clarity, if you've chosen Glacial Augment, you do not want to buy Luden's Echo. And if you've gone with the previous Electrocute runes, you do not want to buy Hextech GLP. Now I want to quickly mention one final rune that isn't optimal but is still viable, Dark Harvest. This rune has serious potential to snowball and of course infinitely scale. You can seriously blow up champs late game when you have this stacked up. Unfortunately, it lacks pressure early on and requires a lot of stacks to be viable compared to the consistency of Electrocute. Take this if you're extremely confident you can pick up stacks early and there's a high chance you will go to late game. You can substitute Dark Harvest into the Electrocute cheat sheet and you'll have everything you need to try this rune. Quick item mentions. Dorans Ring plus 2 HP pots, the most popular and consistent start providing stats and sustain. Corrupting Potion, although it doesn't provide stats, this is a strong start. Plenty of sustain for trades and safety if you're up against a heavy poke champ. Make sure to time this with abilities and auto attacks to make use of the burn passive. Dark Seal plus Refillable. Very cost effective and potential to snowball from the stacks, but you'll lack the mana to lane safely. Only take this if you're extremely confident in your lane. You can still purchase Dark Seal and Refillable potions as they are both great options for your first few backs. Lost Chapter. This is a good aim for your first back at 1300 gold. It will build into either Luden's Echo or Hextech GLP. Seeker's Armguard. A solid defensive option against 80 threats. Get it stacked as soon as possible to benefit from the armor and AP. Stopwatch. Get this if you're going to build Zhonyas eventually, or you just want to survive from a single important play anytime in the game. Special item mentions. Mejais. Although considered a risky item, it can be quite safe on a champ like Ahri. Just be wary of purchasing this against hard CC and assassin champs that have a strong chance of killing you and consequently losing your stacks. Morello. The stats are great and you should prioritize this if the enemy team has plenty of HP sustained champions. Zhonyas. Perfect to counter burst and 80 champs. Protobelt. There's a small niche play Ahri can perform with the actives from this ability. Check out the next section, combos, specifically the item combos for that. Lich Bane. Each R dash counts as a proc for the Lich Bane empowered auto. I'll mention in combos to get optimal damage. Spellbinder. Although this item is rarely taken, it has surprisingly great synergy with Ahri's kit and playstyle. The active increases your AP, amplifying the burst from your combos, and provides a nice burst of movement speed, perhaps useful if you want to close distance to land that all important E charm or simply escape in a clutch situation. Each R dash counts as a charge for this active. You want to spam as many abilities as possible to get this stacking. Banshee's Veil. Although Ahri has plenty of mobility, there will be some cases where hard CC champs can catch you out and burst you before you can dash away. This item will prevent at least one CC ability, specifically something long range, like a Syndra E for example, from catching you out. While we're on Banshees, anytime the enemy has this item, you want to use the first part of your Q to break the shield from a safe range. Enemies will still take damage from the return Q true damage. You can also use W at closer range, as it will only require one flame out of 3 to break the shield. Boot choices. In 90% of games, you want to take Sorcerer's Shoes for the valuable magic pen. Merc Treads are a solid defensive option in certain matchups, so be sure to check out that section for the specific lane. Ionian boots are quite viable, considering you'll have your ultimate up quite frequently, allowing for more plays and general damage over time. Make sure you don't overcap on the CDR with your other item choices. If you've taken Transcendence from the sorcery page, then this won't be a problem. Ninja Tabis are fine, however, when buying to counter heavy AD threats, you should opt for Seeker's Armguard into Zhonyas, which counters burst from most AD assassins mid. At this point, you don't want to miss out on too much damage, so Sorks will always be a solid option, unless of course you have the all AD enemy team comp condition. I would only get these if the specific enemy AD threats are mostly auto attack based, otherwise Zhonyas should suffice as a defensive AD option. Ahri has a few combos, animation cancels, and interactions. Try to learn most of the easy to medium combos and how to get optimal damage from her abilities through poking, trading, and bursting. Don't worry about trying to learn every single interaction and combo off by heart the first time watching, but make sure to watch all of them so you understand what she's capable of. Interactions and animation cancels. R, W. You can W mid-dash. This will feel smooth and allows you to get optimal damage in the combos coming up. Q, then flash. You want to Q, then instantly flash. This will increase the range of Q. It is useful to finish off enemies further away. You can also use this to redirect your Q, perhaps if you want your Q to pass through more enemies. Finally, you can also Q an enemy for the first part of Q, and then flash to reposition so the return Q hits the enemy. Great for those clutch 1v1 situations. E, then flash. E, then instantly flash to not only catch enemies by surprise, but also increase the range of E. This is one of the best tools to make picks, especially when you have plenty of damage to follow up or the rest of your team has more CC to chain them. Even if you have ult up, it is much easier for enemies to react and dodge this if they are ready, so don't be afraid to use E flash over RE when you really need to secure kills. R, then flash. Use your ult, then right before your dash ends, use flash. It will activate the energy bolts on the nearest target after you have flashed, and therefore may be important to get in optimal damage in clutch situations when enemies are out of range. Remember, you need to have vision of them or it won't deal damage. If you are then flash over a wall or in a brush, it won't deal damage. By the way, if you R and instantly flash, it will cancel the R animation. This isn't very useful because you won't get any extra distance from the R dash. Still, it's important to know it exists so you don't accidentally cancel the distance with your dash using flash. Combos. I want to quickly mention that even though your Q has 2 parts of damage, it only counts as 1 Electrocute proc. Therefore, you'll either need to hit 2 auto attacks when you use Q, or hit another ability. So a small combo, assuming enemies are behind minions, so you can't use charm on them, simply Q, auto attack, and W. This will quickly proc Electrocute, and you'll even save some mana by not using charm early on. And just for clarity, even if you hit 1 champ with 3 flames, it will only count as 1 Electrocute proc. Main trade combo pre 6. E, Q, auto attack, W. The important part is landing the charm first, as it amplifies all damage by 20%. You then want to Q immediately since it takes time to return, then auto attack and instantly W. The enemy will be slowly walking towards you during this time. You can follow up with more auto attacks, ignite if you want to finish them off, or simply walk away. The first part of this combo, EQ auto attack, will easily proc the Electrocute damage. Also, with the movement speed you gain from W, you can then use it to move away safely, making it harder for the enemy to counter trade, or continue on the attack, perhaps finishing the enemy off. Gap close trade. W, E, Q, auto attack. With the change to Ahri's W, you can now use the movement speed to gap close, then once within charm range, use E, Q, and finish with an auto attack. Best not to use this around minions as they will absorb the flames from W, causing you to miss out on damage. Main full combo. E, Q, R, W, auto attack, R, auto attack, R. This is the quickest amount of damage in the shortest amount of time. This combo assumes the target is within your E charm range. Again, engaging with charm is important for the amplified damage as well as making the targets easier to land Q. After Q, instantly R, then W. As mentioned earlier, your W will activate mid-dash. There's a 1 second delay between each ultimate dash, so you want to auto attack, then R auto attack, and then your final R dash. Use the last 2 ult dashes to follow up on fleeing enemies, or you can even decide to back off, using the dashes towards a safe area. Later in the game, you'll have enough CDR to be able to get multiple Qs, Ws, and Es within your ult duration. Main full combo with the gap closer. R, W, E, Q, auto attack, R, auto attack, R, auto attack. The initial R is to close distance between you and your target so you can land E. During the first R, you want to activate your W mid-dash, then E, Q, and auto attack. You'll have enough time for the auto attack because there is a 1 second cooldown before you can cast dash again. Deceptive Charm. E plus R. E then instantly R to catch enemies off guard. You need to be within charm range as it will not extend the range of charm, like the charm flash combo. The main point of this combo is just to catch enemies off guard, as some will not see the animation of charm while you are dashing, since your dashing animation slightly covers the heart animation. This can also depend on what skin you're using. Gap closing engage. R, E, then flash. You won't get damage from the first R, but you'll surprise enemies who are far away. This might be just a perfect play when your team needs to desperately make a pick. The drive-by, within charm range. E, Q, R, W, R. You'll get plenty of damage from all your abilities, then use the R to get away. Great to use over walls or in brushes as it will make it hard for some champs to catch you. Drive-by, out of charm range. R, E, Q, W, R. Same concept, but you'll need an initial R to gap close in order to be in charm range. You can use this if you simply just want to get really close to an enemy, so your charmed is almost guaranteed. Bait and reel combos. This is just a quick tip that many of these combos that start with E can be used to first test the waters. Basically, if the charm hits, proceed with the combos. Otherwise, back off and save your cooldowns and mana for the next play. However, when you have enough damage, you can fully commit to the combo whether you land E charm or not. Main things to remember. Your charm is best used first, as already mentioned, since it amplifies all your abilities. Your W provides a burst of movement speed, so use this first if you want to get closer, increasing your chance to land E. Use your ultimate dashes to reposition Q when necessary, as well as using it to close distance and increasing your accuracy to land E charm. With all the previously mentioned flash combos, you want to make sure you use these only for important kills, as the high cooldown of flash isn't worth wasting. However, with a champ like Ahri that has 3 dashes, depending on the enemy's hard CC champs, feel free to use flash combos for as many plays as you want. Item interaction combos. Luden's Echo. You'll get 2 Luden procs from the full main combo, once you've reached around 30% CDR and around level 13. the initial proc from your 100 stack charged Ludens, then, as long as you hit most of your skill shots, 1 more Ludens proc towards the end of the combo. This will add a lot of burst potential and even some AoE splash damage, making it very efficient in teamfights. Hextech GOP. Not really a combo, but you'll want to use this to set up 4 combos, using the slow to increase your chances of landing abilities. Try to hit as many enemies as possible. Icicles can only deal damage 1 champ per icicle, again making it more efficient to hit as many champs as you can. Protobelt. Protobelt, then E. Not a very smooth combo, but it will allow you to close distance and hit charms, perhaps if you're out of E range or you just want to get even closer for a better chance to land E. Protobelt actually can proc more than 1 fireball on the same target, even though it does reduce this past the first 1 fireball. Basically, to get the most absolute max damage from this active ability, use your R to position right in front of the enemy, then use this active to get all the firebolts on one single target. Lich Bane. Although there's no specific combo with this item, you want to apply the empowered autos from this item. There's a 1.5 second cooldown before you activate it, which synergizes well with the 1 second timer between each of your ultimate dashes. Using the full main combo from before, you'll be able to proc 3 empowered autos from the Lich Bane passive. Perhaps even more if you continue to follow up with more damage and secure a kill. Zhonyas interactions. Your Q will continue traveling, your W will activate on the closest target, and E will still charm enemies towards you, all while you're in the safety of Zhonyas stasis. Use these for clutch scenarios. Zhonyas burst. E, Q, W, then Zhonyas. It's great to perform a main trade combo, then use the Zhonyas active for safety. While you're in the Zhonyas stasis, as already mentioned, E and Q will be traveling and your W will activate on the closest target. Perfect for those clutch moments where you risk dying in a 1v1 but you still want to deal optimal damage without auto attacks. Enough to even proc the Electrocute rune. Use Ignite if you have that for extra damage. That's essentially 5 sources of damage while in the safety of Zhonyas. Careful being too quick with using W after Q, as sometimes it won't activate before you Zhonyas. Zhonyas ult burst. R, W, E, Q, then Zhonyas. Similar to the previous combo, however, you'll use the ultimate to engage, get extra damage, as well as getting closer. After the Zhonyas, you can either escape or continue damaging your target. Zhonya bait. Again, no real specific combo, but use it anytime with the previous combos for at least 2.5 seconds of safety. It can be used to bait enemies so your team can follow up. For example, you could hit Charm, causing the enemy to come closer, then Zhonyas for safety, especially if it's a dangerous target. Or perhaps even use Zhonyas to buy some time for your other abilities to come off cooldown. Spellbinder. Use it right at the beginning of combos for the increased AP you gain for 4 seconds, which will be just enough for a complete rotation of all your spells. Now let's take a deeper look into each ability and how you can use this to gain an advantage. Her Q. It will always return to Ahri even if she dies while the Q is mid-flight. Sometimes it might even be worth flashing so you redirect your Q even if you're about to die. This can be great for 1v1 clutch situations, or maybe in a team fight when you can hit a few more enemies right before you die. You want to position with R so you align the return Q with your enemy. You should be able to get 2 Qs early game and 3 Qs later on when you have 30% or more CDR before your ult times out. Mind games with return Q. Many players will actually try to avoid the second part of Q, which means they'll be easier to hit with Charm since you can predict which way they'll walk. Therefore, we can use Q to force them to walk sideways, then aim your E Charm. Obviously you will lose some damage using Charm after, but it might just be the perfect bait tool to land that all important Charm. Use your W for movement speed as a gap closer. You can also use this movement speed to position your Q. Throw out your Q, then use W to move faster and position in a way that will hit your target. We mentioned how important landing your Charm is earlier on. With a burst of movement speed from W, use it to close distance between you and your enemy, increasing your chance to land that all-important Charm. W is great to chase down enemies or escape from enemies over long distances. Ignite an enemy early whenever fighting around areas where you lack vision. If you're within W range, the vision Ignite provides will allow you to damage the enemy. E. Use the Glacial Augment slow from the autos, which makes it easier to land your E. Some enemies who have a burst of movement speed and cannot be slowed, for example Master Yi, will run towards you at their high movement speed, so keep this in mind. Charming a champ over a wall or other terrain will path them towards which the shortest distance to Ahri is, so it may actually be harder to guess the movement of the champ. In these cases, it's best to see which direction the enemy moves once you've charmed them, and then throwing out your Q. We mentioned in abilities that Ahri's Orb deals true damage on the way back. The 20% bonus damage on charm targets applies to this true damage, further increasing the importance of landing charm. Using charm on jungle camps can reset the HP if you start with charm. Keep this in mind so you don't take too long taking buffs. Many players know how effective charm is when it comes to being one shot, so they'll almost always try to avoid this one skill shot. In some circumstances, when you are confident you will get the kill without the need for charm, you can simply walk towards them, watch them constantly sidestep until they are literally dead, without needing to throw it out a single time. Obviously, when it comes to enemies that have flash or are generally mobile, you want to R dash in first, wait for them to either flash or use their escape ability, then throw out charm, since most will anticipate the charm with the first dash. Even if you are extremely low on HP, try to stick around for team fights, since you can help your team from long range with the important CC from this ability. Ultimate. Wall dashes. There are plenty of walls Ahri can dash over. Most of the thin and medium walls are quite easy and they require almost no practice. The harder walls, however, have certain parts where they are too thick and require a little bit of practice in order to consistently dash over. There is a slight delay while a champion is entering vision, which means sometimes you won't activate the energy bolts from this ability, risking your chances to deal damage. Basically, as mentioned before, if you can, you want to ward brushes or fog of war before you use R if the damage is really important. But in some clutch situations, you won't have enough time or you simply don't have wards, so you'll have to dash and hope for the best, as it can be inconsistent. Using R in place will actually save some time, but still deal damage to enemies within the energy bolt range. Therefore, it's perfectly fine to dash in place if you don't want to position anywhere, but you just want to deal damage from this ability. You can potentially dash over 3 different or the same walls when playing an escape, so don't just dash through lane, use walls to make it harder for the enemies to catch up. You can even juke them by dashing over one wall, seeing if they flash or dash over that wall, then just dash over the same wall. Most enemies don't have the same dashing capabilities as Ahri does with her ultimate. Use R dash to catch any enemies who are 2 to 3 walls away from you. And again, as with E, ignite an enemy early whenever fighting around areas where you lack vision. With the vision Ignite provides, you will still be able to deal damage from R, which might be vital in clutch situations. Early game laning phase. Laning phase mostly involves pushing and poking. Ahri pushes pretty fast early on with her Q. You want to push the wave into the enemy tower if the enemy champ struggles to push or CS under tower. Look up matchups for specific champs. Because of the high mana cost, try not to waste your charm unless you're going for a kill, you want to CC the enemy for your jungler's ganks, or you're using it for safety and trying to escape. You can also use the movement speed from W to escape certain ganks, or simply use it to dodge certain skill shots. You have great gank setup with your charm or flash charm, especially if your jungler is able to follow up with a lot of damage or chain CC. She's decent in 2v2 skirmishes, assuming you land your E, charm. Since you push pretty fast, you'll have the priority if your jungler decides to invade in a lot of matchups. You can also use your early pushing power to perhaps pull off an early pre-6 gank. Most enemies won't expect it, and the enemy mid laner probably won't ping since they'll assume you went back to base. At level 6, you have potential to 1v1 most laners. I suggest poking them down with Q or throwing out the occasional charm to follow up with more damage. If any of these land, it's your chance to go in. You have great roams, gap closing with 3 dashes. There are some lanes that will push you in hard, so getting blue is necessary to counter the push and keep up with CS. Fights around Dragon and Herald are in your favor because of their mobility to dash over walls aggressively or to escape. With these early team fights, you want to finish off low HP targets in the backline. Even if you're low, if it's safe enough, try to stick around in teamfights. Your charm can really help your team secure kills from safe range. Mid-game. Ahri really excels once she has Ludens and 1 or 2 more items. You have insane potential to one-shot squishies and generally make picks with your team. You have the option to farm side lanes, to pick up farms safely, using your ultimate to get away or even 1v1. Soak up pressure by pushing mid. Forcing 2 to 3 champs mid will open up chances for your other laners to come back if they're behind on farm. Even if you're behind and your team is doing well, you still provide great CC with your charm, so grouping is fine and you could just focus on peeling for the important carries. Simply dashing around the backline can offer a diversion and zone out the enemy backline from entering the fight. If you're fed and have purchased a death cap, you can go ham on the enemy team and output as much damage as possible, allowing your team to clean up. The mid-game teamfights will mostly require you to pick out and burst squishies, deal AoE damage with your Q, and even peel your carries with charm, as well as using the slow actives if you've gone with the Glacial Augment build. There's a niche play where you can actually split push on Ahri. Perhaps if you're ahead and want to take the game into your own hands, especially if you aren't able to win teamfights. I would even recommend purchasing a Lich Bane for the extra damage you deal to towers. You've got great potential to take towers fast if enemies don't come and deal with you, and even if they come, simply dash away and consider taking a 1v1 or 1v2 depending on the champs and how strong you are at this point. Look for dives when you have the chance, using your R to engage, hit charm, taking a few tower shots, then escaping with 1 or 2 dashes. Late game. Most of mid game applies to late game. She doesn't shine as much as mid game, but she still remains a threat to any squishies. Making picks is your best chance for success. It will be a little challenging to burst champs at this stage, since many carries will have a Guardian Angel, Zhonyas, and usually have all their summoners up. You have decent wave clear with Q, so stay alive to protect towers and turtle to prolong the game for your team. Don't be afraid to ever waste flash. Your ult is 3 dashes, so even if your flash is down, you still have plenty of mobility and safety. Also, the CDR of your ultimate will be around 40 seconds, so after a fight, going to base and preparing for the next play, it will almost always be up. Although you aren't always able to control this, aim to finish out games as quickly as possible. Ahri doesn't really scale as well as some other mids, but she still has the same threat level, so don't feel like you'll lose just because of scaling, as any single play or pick late game can ultimately result in a victory. Teamfighting. Teamfighting on Ahri is quite flexible. Considering all her tools, there are quite a few options to think about before your team enters a fight. Probably the most optimal goal as Ahri is to focus on picking out squishies and trying to one-shot burst them with a full combo and hopefully getting out safely. If the enemies are positioned far back and there are too many threats to simply dash in, aim to deal as much AoE damage with your Q, hitting as many targets as possible. This becomes easier when they are grouped around certain objectives or tight parts of the jungle. You have decent peel for your carries with charm. You can further peel them if you've chosen to go with the Glacial Augment build, using the slow actives from Hextech GLP and Twin Shadows. Sometimes you want to simply zone out the enemy carries, so dashing towards the backline will surely draw attention. You don't even have to throw your charm out in some situations, as simply being in close proximity will deter the enemy backline from entering the fight. When the enemy tanks start to chase and focus you, simply dash away to safety, meanwhile allowing your team, hopefully your backline, dealing damage during this time. Basically, you just want to create a diversion and threat, so your team can safely output damage. Obviously, you must care against certain hard CC enemy team comps. Be creative with Ahri's kit and your items. Position aggressively from behind, as you have 3 dashes. Most teams will not expect an Ahri to appear from behind. Go for a classic Zhonyas bait, aiming to waste important enemy abilities. This will allow your team to follow up. Once out of Zhonyas, consider going in to further deal damage and clean up fights, or simply back off using the rest of your dashes. Engaging with ult, flash, charm, and actives from Glacial is perfect to start a fight, especially when your team lacks engage. All games will be unique, but hopefully with all these suggestions, you can make the most optimal plays in your games. Strengths. Let's go over reasons why you want to pick Ahri in your next game. Mobility. With 3 dashes, you cover plenty of distance, which you can use to assassinate any targets that are far away or simply any tight situation through almost any walls. Her burst of movement speed from W will allow her to be agile while her ultimate is on cooldown. AoE and single target damage. Her Q, W and R do plenty of damage to multiple targets. Try to hit those Qs when enemies are aligned in teamfights. And of course hitting that charm will mean she's able to completely burst a single target. Making picks. Hitting charm mid to late game will almost always result in a kill. The charm not only renders the enemy useless, it makes them walk towards Ahri and consequently the rest of your team. Take Glacial Augment with Twin Shadows and you'll be catching out enemies even in Fog of War. HP Sustain. Your passive allows you to keep pretty healthy during laning phase and in most parts of the game. Safe first pick and always in meta. Even though she does have some tough lanes, she can always choose to play completely passive and farm safely with her long range AoE Q. She fits into almost any team comps and rarely falls out of meta. Basically an extremely safe champion to learn, as having an AP mid like Ahri will always be useful. Roaming. At level 6 you have great roam potential. 3 dashes will catch out most bot and top laners by surprise. Even if you're going in jungle and things turn sour pretty fast, you have all the dashes you need to escape. Safely clear side lanes. Even if you do have a bad laning phase, you can still pick up farm on the side lanes using your ult for safety or even look for a 1v1 kill. Weaknesses. Now let's look over weaknesses and some tips to combat them. Mana hungry. Her Q and E have quite high mana costs early on. You must decide whether you want to Q to push or harass. Ideally, if you can land Q on the enemy anytime they step in and around minions, you'll be optimizing your mana. 2 to 3 missed charms early laning phase and you'll find yourself unable to clear or even offer assistance to your jungler if they decide to gank. I would advise saving charms for times when you're either getting ganked or you're getting ganked by the enemy jungler and need the CC for safety, or you have a very good chance to kill your laner. Be very careful about using charm early on simply for poke for the main reason we just mentioned. Perhaps when you have 2 to 3 points in Q, then charm becomes worth the mana cost as it would amplify the damage. Look over the gameplay section early laning phase for a few more tips to help you out with the mana costs. Skill shot reliant. Missing a single charm or Q will most likely cost you a kill and even your life. There are plenty of ways to increase the accuracy of landing charm and Q, including the slow actives from Glacial Augment build, using R to position closer and redirect the second part of Q, and of course the E-Flash combo, perfect for making picks and plays with your team. And of course now there's the movement speed from your W. Try to position in brushes or charms over walls to catch unsuspecting enemies. When enemies are unaware of your presence, charms become infinitely easier to land. With enough game experience, you'll consistently hit these two all important skill shots. Hard CC. Even with 3 dashes, if you ever get hit by a single hard CC, you'll likely get bursted and jumped on by the enemy team. A good strategy is to list the main CC threats before a fight starts in your head. Once you see one or more of these CCs used, this is your time to go in. Basically, play as a safe backliner while the enemy hard CCs are up, then go all in once they've all or almost all of them have been used. Remember to use your ult not only for damage, but as a great way to dodge certain CC skill shots. Has to get close as a mage. The W and R requires Ahri to get decently close in order to activate the damage. Even though she's more of an assassin with her ult, she still has that safety poke mage playstyle. Careful when you dash in as you're extremely squishy. Once you have Zhonyas, this becomes less of an issue, and you can even use this to bait enemies. Weak against tanky champs. Once you've gone through your full rotation of spells, you do not have much consistent damage, and it means Ahri can struggle to burst certain tanky champs. Try not to fall behind on items and levels, which makes side leaning pretty important in some games. The Leandry's item can help against extra tanky enemy teams. Your Q does do true damage on the way back, so do whatever you can to ensure it lands on tankier champs. She's a sitting duck while her ult is down. While your ultimate is on cooldown, you'll lack most of the pressure and potential to escape. This is the time you need to play extremely passive, especially if your flash is also on cooldown. Luckily, we'll be building plenty of CDR in both the main builds, so at 30 to 40% CDR, your ult will only be on cooldown for around 40 seconds. Ahri sits on a fine balance between a mage and an assassin. With AoE and single target damage, CC and mobility, you will always provide something to your team. She's a pretty simple champion to understand, but landing those all-important charms consistently will separate the good Ahri players from the true Ahri mains. Ahri was the first champ I played over 100 games with towards the end of Season 3, so she'll always remain a special champ to me. If this guide motivated you to play Ahri, or you simply enjoyed the content and style, give it a thumbs up and make sure to subscribe for plenty of ultimate guides in the future. There's so many guides I plan on making, even remaking certain champs, so remember to click the bell icon so you're notified instantly when a new guide is uploaded. Because the season is about 2 months from ending, I'm gonna start a new series called ASAP Guides, where they'll have all the important tricks but in a shorter video. I'll be able to make way more guides, so let me know in the comments what champion you want to see next. Ultimate guides will still continue when preseason starts, and I'll be focusing on all the major item updates for Season 11. I'm Zoose, and I'll see you in the next video.